Welcome to Accountable, where your business is our business. Hosted by David R. Peters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accountable, the podcast for financial professionals, small business owners, and people like you. My name's Dave. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Hey, you know, a lot of us, I think if we are in the financial profession of any type, whether we're a financial advisor, whether we're a CPA, or if we're just starting our own business, I got to tell you, one of the things that I think we really struggle with is balance. There's a lot of things that I think that CPAs do well. There's a lot of things that I think that we in the financial world that we do very well, but I'm not sure that balance is necessarily something that we do well as a profession. And so I know that I've been pretty forthright, especially on this podcast, about how I struggle with balance. I'm a small business owner, and it just seems like, especially when you're kind of trying to get started, seems like you're kind of working all the time. And so I think, maybe balance is something that a lot of us struggle with. And I know that a lot of you that are out there that are listening to this, you may be struggling with balance too. And so we're going to be talking about this idea of creating business balance and bliss in your organization. How's that for a title? So creating a business balance and bliss within your organization. And we have a great guest today, Amy Vetter, who is a CPA, as well as the CEO of the B3 Method Institute, keynote speaker, published author, and someone who I think just has a really unique perspective on the financial profession and just some of the struggles of small business entrepreneurship and just kind of everything that goes along with it. So, Amy, thank you so much for being on Accountable.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
So, Amy, I have to say, I just gave our listeners a snippet of your resume, and you have a very full resume too. And so, I guess, talk to me about this idea of trying to achieve balance, because I think that for a lot of us, I think that this is a point where we struggle. And I'm also not sure, because I think a lot of times when we talk about balance, we think about taking it easy, right? I mean, we think about, our kind of our space to do the things that we like. And, but you have a very full resume. I, do a lot of things too. I'm sure that a lot of our listeners, especially if they're CPAs, they're doing a lot of stuff too. Is it really possible to have balance as a financial professional?
So it's a great place to start. This is really the reason why I changed the term to work-life harmony versus balance, because I do believe that people put a lot of stress on themselves just about work-life balance. And it becomes a stressor of its own because we make it much bigger than it needs to be very often. But it's really, why I changed it to work-life harmony is I have a musical background and I still play music. And for those of you that play music or listen to music, you know that music ebbs and flows. It gets loud, it gets soft, it gets fast, it gets slow. And that's the way our days go. And it's important that we allow the day to ebb and flow. And it's not about the amount of time, the quantity, it's about the quality. And so it's important that even if we can build in 2 minutes throughout our day, that we're utilizing time within our day to reset, replenish ourselves, re-energize, rather than the day just snowballing from meeting to meeting to meeting. And then we find where our energy is best to figure out where we do the things that fill our cup, because that's not the same for everybody else. And I think a lot of times when we hear the term work-life balance, many people that know of me know I do yoga. I'm a CPA as well. But that's what they associate as like, oh, like, I've got to do something like that. And no, it's finding the thing where time just disappears for you, where you can get that release. And a lot of times we're trying to look to somebody else and say, oh, they've got it mastered. That's working for them. I should just do that. And then I just feel stressed out doing that thing. So it's really going internal to find the things that really will re-energize you and let your brain just release from the day.
So I think that you said a lot of very interesting things there, because I think, again, I think a lot of people, they associate, you call it work-life harmony. I like that concept better, because I think a lot of times, people, they think that they have to, sort of necessarily take time off, take lavish vacations or something like that to re-energize. And I don't get the sense that that's what you're saying. What you're saying is that we need to find the place that for us is going to give us energy and make us, kind of ready to face whatever it is that's up ahead.
Yeah. And not pushing ourselves too hard. So I think just within the CPA profession, I just put a book out in April, and it just came out on Audible this summer, called Disconnect to Connect, Tap into the Power Within You to Create the Life You Desire. And in that book, I talk about belief systems. And this is one of those belief systems because we've been trained as accountants that everything's about time.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a foundational belief system that we believe is true. Where it's not necessarily about the time, it's about the feeling. And that's a difference, right, than what we've believed before. And so, just like you said, we've got to carve out this time and make it non-billable.
Right.
So instead of thinking of it as that, instead of a 30-minute meeting, maybe I'm making a 25-minute meeting. Instead of an hour meeting, I'm making a 50-minute meeting. That I'm giving myself space between my meetings throughout the day to reset and finding what those things are that reset me. So that could be listening to music for a few minutes, checking my email to just get aside before I go to my next meeting, because what's really important is that we're present in the meetings we're doing and in the work that we're doing, but we've got to do something to take a break with our brain and reset. That could be doing a very quick meditation, taking a walk, getting something to eat, whatever it is, so that before you get to your next meeting, you're present for that person or whatever, that client, your staff, whatever that is, to make sure you're present with them. So work-life harmony means it can be throughout your day, or it could be a bigger thing. So some days you have more time to do the thing, go running, take up your hobby, play music, whatever it is. And you are figuring out where are the boundaries in your day to stop working. And I think you started out talking about, how many hours accountants work, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that in all the research around working, it is not, again, like we get past an 8-hour day, we get diminishing return with our brains because it's just too much pushing on it. So when we take breaks throughout the day, we actually become more productive, more efficient. We can get more work done, but we're very intentional about our time in the day and how we spend it so that we can rejuvenate and make sure we're getting things done and being able to have the time for our families, for our personal hobbies, whatever that is.
I want to go back to something that you said just a minute ago, because I think that this is an important point. You're right. We as accountants, it's all about those billable hours. I mean, I don't know where that came from initially, but I just know that at the first accounting firm that I ever worked for, it was always important for me to track my time, right? So make sure that you bill it to the right client, make sure that you code it to the right client so that we can bill those things out. And there was always this kind of weird fascination with how many hours that you worked, especially during busy season, right? So like, I worked, 95 hours, you worked 100 hours this week, therefore you must somehow be better than I.
Yes.
That's a weird way of winning, but I guess you won in that instance, right? So, is it do organizations sort of encourage, maybe inadvertently, maybe on purpose, I don't know, do they encourage this kind of mindset where, kind of this unbalanced lifestyle?
Yeah, well, and it's definitely, this billable time thing in the accounting profession.
Yeah.
Just to your point, we value ourselves based on time versus output. So just like you said, if my timesheet says this many hours, but it's not necessarily that you did good work, that you did valuable work, that your clients appreciated the work you were doing. Yeah. It's just that your hours were there. And so when I work with firms on this topic of trying to help them transform their business to get out of this cycle, what I'm up against in the beginning is like, well, and I'll just put it out there. My challenge to firms when I go into an organization is you're going to be able at the end of this to tell your staff and yourselves that we do not work more than 45 hours a week.
Wow.
Ever, throughout the year. And so when I say that, I have to figure out where in my business I have to shift things. And the initial things that come up that we have to get over is the belief system that this is the accounting profession that will never work. And so that's a belief system. That's not a reality. That's not truth. But we often put those belief systems up because the problem is we have to change in order to accomplish something different, that we have to operate differently. We have to lead differently. We have to set up boundaries and technology and everything else in our organization to make that work. And really, it goes against the grain, because if for 20, 25, 30 years you've been working like this, it's very hard if you work a 40-hour week to feel like you're doing a good job.
Right.
And so I've dealt that very many times. We get to the end and, I'm meeting with them as a follow-up and they're like, I can just go home and I'm making more money than I was making. And I'm like, go home. Yeah. They're like, well, what if this changes? I don't understand how this is working. It's like, you did all the stuff. You did all the work to get there. But still in our heads, because we've been for so long on that belief system, that if I go home on a normal work day, that means I'm not as good. But even though I want to spend time with my family, I want to have my own, hobbies and things like that. And then there are those that I encounter too that really like to work.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for them to break that. But one of the things in this profession and where we're having trouble recruiting college kids and getting a pipeline is they're hearing about the work life of these firms and don't want it. And so over and over, I've not only talked to college students, I've talked to deans of colleges that are hearing it. And we have to be very careful as leaders in a firm that we are not demonstrating the qualities that would make someone not want to work there. So even if that's the way we've always worked and we enjoy working that way, we have to be very transparent about, like, if one of the things that's come up before, for example, is I'll have staff say, I don't want to be partner because I see the way that they work. And I go to the partners and give them the feedback and they're like, but I take Fridays off to go golfing. I'm like, are you telling anyone that? Do you have that on your calendar? Okay. Are you being transparent about that? So even though they're seeing you work on a Saturday, you chose to take Friday off, but no one knows.
Right.
And we've kept that behind the scenes, where this is something that it's really important to say, I do these things and I want you to do these things. And work-life balance, to a point you made in the beginning, does not mean we're not working a full-time job. It's just we're working different hours or having different boundaries in our life in order to do the things that fulfill us as well and keep us happy and bring that joy in our life.
I think that's interesting especially right now, I think we are seeing a lot of pushback, at least in the CPA profession, around just the amount of hours. And I think that, at least a lot of partners that I talk to, the pushback, I guess, is that a lot of folks that are coming out of school, a lot of newer folks into the accounting and finance professions, that they're just not willing to pay their dues. And I'm sure,
right.
I'm sure you've heard that,
yes.
right? I mean, so so it's like, well, I had to pay my dues. I had to
right.
work X number of tax seasons to get by. Shouldn't they have to do the same thing?
Yes.
How do you get around that? Or, you talked about changing mindset. How do we even begin?
So I think the way I discuss that with partners, because that comes up all of the time. And so they look at this as like people aren't as invested or don't care about their work as enough. And if you talk to the staff, that is not the case, usually, for the most part. No one takes a job to not do well. Like
right.
a personal, goal of everyone is to be seen and to be appreciated, and they want to do a good job. It's just when the organization starts pushing back, and then you start losing enthusiasm by team members, and when it's pushing back. So one of the things that I talk to partners about is to flip it and say, what is your goal? So if your goal is to retire and have a pipeline of partners and stay an independent firm, you cannot keep operating the way that you're operating.
Yeah.
If your goal is to be bought out, because you won't have a pipeline to eventually take over as partner, then you can keep operating the way that you are until you're ready to be acquired. But there's going to be no staff to take your seat. So right. You can keep sitting firm in that belief system, but you will be alone at some point, unless it flips. No one is buying into it.
Yeah.
And so that is the hard truth about it.
Yeah.
And you've got to make a decision for yourself of I've definitely had partners things are going good. We're making money. I'm making money. Why should I have to change? Well, you don't have to change. But if you do want to retire and have people that are, bench strength to be partner one day, you have to change.
So really, the point that you're bringing up is really about sustainability.
Yes.
It's about just, because it's not just, kind of getting over the hump once. It's trying to create something that is going to be
transformation.
Right. So, you talk a lot about finding the power in your firm's purpose. I think that's something that I've heard you speak on. So this sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about here. Is that right? When we're talking about,
I think those are two things, right? Okay. So purpose and financial goals or whatever your personal financial goals are separate. It does need to align.
Okay.
But what I find too in firms is that if I go in and ask, what's your mission statement? What are your values? What's the first thing they do? They have to bring up their website to go read it.
Yeah.
It's not permeated into the organization. And so if we do have values around the way we treat employees, the way we want our culture to be, the way we want to be to our clients, that has to be permeated into everything we do in the organization. It's not something that is forgotten about. It is how we evaluate people, no matter what level they are at. And so often this becomes marketing speak, but not necessarily cultural. And that cultural piece of it is what then starts transforming the organization, because if we're leading different, if we're actually caring about people, if we're saying we care about our people, it's not these so then if we get in this, back room and we're arguing about billable time, we come back to our value of treating people fairly or equally. I see that a lot. So how does that value align with what you're saying in the back room of, no, they need to work 60, 70 hours a week?
Right.
Does that align with our values?
Right.
And then you have a conversation about that rather than a tit for tat over, what happened to me, what I've had to go through. Those are different value systems, for each individual. But it shouldn't be how someone is evaluated if they bought into your values and your mission in your organization. And so the way I look at it is twofold. It's important to know everyone's purpose in the work that they're doing. So not just, I prepare financial reports and I'm a CPA or an accounting professional, whatever I am. It's who am I doing it for and why? What is the value I'm trying to create in the world? And so for me, which, I've talked about in my talks and in my book, I had my mom lose her business when I was 16, and I watched how that affected our family, how, everyone that worked for her lost their jobs, and, how our life changed. So my overriding purpose as an accountant is that I want to make sure that small business owners are able to continue their dreams and not have to leave their dreams, or their clients not be able to benefit from the things that they do and the staff not be able to work there. So anything I do, I need to make sure that that work is aligning with that. And so then I create my business goals, making sure that my career choices are aligned with that. And so as a leader in a firm, if I care about my people, I need to be really clear what my personal purpose is, and that the work I'm doing and how that might apply is, so for instance, I really love music, so right. I want to make sure that musicians are able to thrive and so forth. So I might decide I'm going to specialize in musicians and anything in the arts, because when I'm doing it, it doesn't feel like work. And so I want to make sure for the staff that's working for me and the team that's working for me, they're doing things that they believe in it every single day, that it's more than the actual work. It's the value that they see that the firm is creating for these people. And then it changes the culture, and it changes the way I look at my work, instead of just like a billable hour goal that's on a spreadsheet, and I've got to do work that I don't feel is very it might be non-value added, but I see the bigger picture of how I'm helping and what I'm doing. And so that's got to all align up to our mission statement and our values as well.
So it sounds like, though, that, it's really driven by trying to figure out what your purpose is first. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think it's an important exercise, because I don't think, I just did a session with college students a couple of weeks ago, and I've had a ton of them reach out to me after, because so much of, even when we're back in college, if you think about your college self, you're picking a career, not a purpose, a lot of times. And so if you don't understand the value you're trying to create in the world, then when you get a crappy job or a crappy client or whatever, you quit.
Right. Yeah.
Because you don't understand your long-term vision of what you're trying to accomplish, and that this is actually leading you to that. And if I'm an employer, I want to make sure that I understand what those values are and that we're living them, so that people, when we do have those hard jobs, because we could say our jobs are 40 hours a week, right? But then we've got this big project that comes in, and it might require more hours for a short-term period. But if I know that people, maybe it's a sustainability company, and I've got accountants on there that are like huge into the environment, well, they're not going to care the amount of hours they're working on that project, because they believe in what that company's doing and they want to be a part of it. Right. And so it's really trying to align all of that in our organization and making sure the work matches people's purpose, if we're really going to say people matter.
Yeah. I think that's that what you're talking about. I think is big. I wonder how this fits in with the mindset of an entrepreneur and somebody who's trying to start something on their own. I work with a lot of small business owners. I've helped start multiple businesses. A lot of the people that I talk to, they either are a small business owner or they're people who consult with a lot of small business owners. And I think especially when you're first getting started, I mean, what you're talking about defining purpose, I think is really hard because a lot of times, I mean, your purpose is to just get to the next day and not be, and still have, still have a business. I mean, I distinctly remember getting started on my own and thinking to myself, okay, if I can just make money today, then I've done okay.
Yes.
I just think it's harder for entrepreneurs. What advice or thoughts might you have around for some of those folks that maybe are just getting started and are trying to build?
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur. I've had multiple businesses, and I do think purpose leads everything as an entrepreneur. Because what happens as an entrepreneur, I sometimes... I've had a couple instances where I've realized like being an entrepreneur is sometimes like gambling.
Yeah.
So you're like, maybe tomorrow that big hit's going to come in or, or something, you get this big client come in and it's lucrative. However, it doesn't align to the work that you want to do.
Yeah.
So you start going down the wrong path in your business and you're like, wait, I hate this. I hate this work. Yes, I'm making money, but that's not why I went into business for myself. And so this is something in my own business. We meet every 6 months to make sure we haven't gotten off track because it can happen easily, right? And I'll give you an example. When I started my keynote and consulting business 6 years ago, and I was, this is what has been important to me to get this message into this world of mindfulness in the workplace and creating work-life harmony. But before I had left my previous job, I had done a session where I talked about blockchain. Mm-hmm. And I am a technology person, right? So in the initial stages of my business where, I'm really trying to navigate it and figure out the speaking business and so forth, I was getting all these calls in for blockchain.
Right.
And I'm like, so I started doing some of them and I'm like, wait, I don't want it. This is not what, and it's a big risk, right? Because the thing is, I know I could probably make a lot of money going down that path. There was a lot of stuff coming in at that time, right? But then I had to come back and remember, like, if I was going to take this risk to go into business, this was not the path I took and you have to get from that scarcity mindset into belief in yourself and your purpose. And make sure that you're very targeted into the things that you want to be doing. And so if I start shifting that, well, then I'm going to get different clients. I'm going to get different work. And then I have to be okay with that. And it's a very hard thing to do as an entrepreneur because it's all about surviving, like you talked about. Yeah. But we also have to make sure we've done the right budgeting and know where we're going to put guardrails around taking risks and so forth, but really believe in the process that we put in place in our business to target who we want to target to be working with. And in my case, what I wanted to be putting out in the world, else I didn't need to leave my prior job, but it just was, it's a hard decision, but you have to have those touch points in your business where you come back and say, are we still living to our purpose? Do we still believe in our purpose? Or has it shifted? Because maybe it does shift. That's another thing. When I opened my first accounting business, I thought I was just going to have bookkeepers and I was going to run bookkeepers and so forth. And at the time, this is back in 2001, QuickBooks wasn't as big as it is today.
Yeah.
And there certainly wasn't as much training for accountants as there is today. And so I saw someone's ad and they had the QuickBooks Certified Pro Advisor logo. And I was like, oh, I should probably get that. So I went online, took the test, really didn't understand it any better than passing a test, to get the logo. I was really doing it for marketing purposes, going into small business. And my first client call, he asked me to come and look at his QuickBooks. And I'm like, well, we do bookkeeping services. He's like, yeah, I don't want you to do the bookkeeping. I want you to come out and train me on how I do it. And so I came out, and that was not what I expected going into business. Like, that was not like my initial thought of what I'd be doing. Now, I went into that and I realized my purpose of helping small business owners, this was even better. But I didn't even know it was an opportunity for my business until I started it. So I did start shifting the services in my business, because then I was like, oh, this even goes closer to helping small business owners be able to teach them financial understanding and intelligence around their numbers and how things get placed, and then to have those conversations with them. So bookkeeping became a portion, but it wasn't the only thing we were doing anymore. And so there's times where it does pivot and open up something that maybe you didn't realize. And then you still have to question, is this my purpose? Is this what I want to do? And in that case, it was like, yeah, that's even better.
I think that's very well said. I mean, I think that because I think what you're talking about is you're talking about being patient for kind of the right things that are going to align with your purpose, being confident enough, because I think that's actually where a lot of people struggle. Is I actually think it comes down to a confidence issue. You talked about a scarcity mindset, because the fear is I think, especially when you're an entrepreneur, is that, well, what if no one else comes, right? What if this is the only client? And I realize, looking back, that seems kind of silly, but at the time, I mean, when you're struggling, and I think, especially when those first few paychecks are, not,
for a long time. Yeah. And you go through, valleys, dips, in being an entrepreneur where you reinvest and things like that. And so, but it comes back to the work-life boundaries, because if I start getting busy, taking on clients I don't want to take on, or work I don't want to take on, and then the right work comes in, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I want to make sure I take that. Well, now I've got 40 hours worth of work I don't want. And then now I'm starting to take on another 20. Well, this is where the hamster wheel starts. Yeah. Right? Because I did not create space for the work that I wanted. And now I'm working around the clock. And a lot of things I hear also with entrepreneurs is, if I took money from other people to start my business, then I feel like I have to work even more hours, and I have to, keep on that hamster wheel. But then we start taking ourselves away from our family and our friends, and they're getting upset. Like, I thought this business was going to give you freedom, and now I never see you, and I'm never with you. And so it then goes to the next, and you're tired, and and your brain can't necessarily work like that. Like, it just, so the research that I have in this book, in Business Balance Bliss book, is that our brains have an optimum productivity of 2 to 6 hours a day. We really get past, where we get diminishing returns, more than that. So if you're working a 14-hour day, how much did you really create in value when you're tired, you're pushing through, you're exhausted, and you're not doing anything that makes you feel better, that gives you joy? Or whether you took breaks throughout the day. So another thing that's important about productivity is, I think the research that I have in the book is that you can work 52 minutes on one task, but you need to give yourself 17 minutes of a break and then restart, where we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then we're tired and it's not exactly the output that we wanted.
So you mentioned being a technology person. Is it possible for technology to help with some of this?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think a lot of us, and I'm sure that there's going to be people that are listening to this that are going to disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. I think a lot of folks, I think especially in the CPA profession, especially now with AI and all of these other things that are kind of coming into our lives, I think a lot of times we look at technology as a threat, not necessarily as something that could be helpful to us to sort of achieve more and maybe try to get to a better place in our working lives, more harmony. Talk about that. How can we utilize technology? Is there ways to do it? Is there ways to start thinking about it better?
Yeah, so one of the things that I see over and over is that we put technology in place to solve one thing, but we never actually took time to learn the technology fully and think about the standard operating procedures of using it for everybody. Like we put, guardrails around what a certain technology is supposed to do. And to your point about AI, sometimes we think about this as so much bigger than it is. So I'm going to bring it down simple, is Teams. So Teams or Slack. We put those in our organization so we can collaborate, but then we don't put any standard operating procedure around it of saying no emails internally. Everything goes in Slack or Teams, right? So when we do that, then someone's emailing me, someone's sending a message in Slack, they might text me, they don't know which one I'm looking at.
Right.
So now we've actually created more stress with the technology than the intention of what that technology is supposed to serve. So there's always a human element, and I have a whole process where I call mindful technology, of looking at what is the return on investment we wanted from the technology, but what is the human experience that we wanted from the technology as well. And so if we're using a collaborative technology like that, the human experiences, we should have less email. Things should start being taken care of because there's teams involved in communications. I can find information that's not locked in email. That's all. And I also have to monitor how many channels are sitting in Teams or Slack or whatever I'm using. So if no one's actually an oversight on that technology, it gets unwieldy. It becomes more stressful. No one really knows why we're using this or what it's for. And then the worst part is every partner decides how they're going to use it. So one partner was like, I'm not using it. You get emails from me. And then another partner is trying to use it. And so that becomes really stressful for the culture, the environment, and so forth. Everyone's got to buy into the standard operating procedure of putting a certain technology in place. And you're actually thinking through what the business process is around it. So the whole point of it is not to stress people out more, it's to stress less.
Right. Yeah. So, I think, again, I think it points to trying to, taking a step back almost and trying to recognize what's the point of the technology. The technology shouldn't drive us. Really, the technology is something that, should be used to meet a business need, and
to
it
enable
gets kind of and it kind of almost gets twisted around inadvertently, and I think you're pointing out something that is peculiar, but I think that a lot of folks probably experience in their organizations daily.
Yes. Yeah. And, so any technology, and that's part of workplace transformation, because it actually creates time wasters if we haven't thought it through, because one of the things that I see a lot is that, I'll use CAS as an example because I see a lot of CAS practices that, let's say they're using Bill for their accounts payable technology. But then, I don't know, some client comes in and has a different need. So some other accountant goes and gets their own license for an AP processing technology, and then another one. And then we don't even realize in our firm we've got like 4 different licenses and nobody's fully trained on any of them. So we haven't given them the time to train on them and really understand how to optimize that technology, how to build it into our business process so that it can actually eliminate the time that we're spending with clients on data entry, and we've got more time to spend talking about their business or the insights that we get from that technology. But usually people know about 10%, maybe 20% of what a technology is capable of, because they don't actually set the time aside for people to be fully trained, have subject matter experts on each technology in their organization that can consistently tell you, oh, they put out this new feature this week, and this will help us with that. We just put it in place and walk away, and then everyone's using it more transactionally than for its full potential.
So I think, really investing in the technology and really remembering kind of what it's all about, that seems to be critical in order to make it successful. I think that you pointed out a lot of great things. So if we, so one of the things that you mentioned here is this idea of being a connected leader, and I want to make sure that we touch on this idea, because I think that this is something that that we've been kind of hitting on at various points throughout our conversation here today. But I would love to hear that. What exactly does it mean to be kind of a connected leader? I think that's an important point here that you bring up.
Yeah. So this was a leadership principle I have brought out in my recent book about disconnecting to connect. So so it all works together, right? Like, we've got to take moments in our day to decompress, reset, understand what we want out of a meeting or a person, or so we might have a meeting coming up, but sometimes we run right into the meeting without actually knowing what is the outcome we want from this, how do we want to help, and so forth. So when I, was really going through the ranks and becoming a leader, I was told many times that you kind of keep a line between you and your staff because you might have to fire them one day. That was said to me multiple times. Yeah. And I never could really do that. It just wasn't a natural skill of mine to just keep this shield because I would like to get to know people and understand them.
What a horrible thought.
I know, right? You're just thinking through the negative, right?
Like, what happens if this goes bad? I mean, that's true. I mean, you can say that about anything, right? I mean, I agree with you.
But again, it's a belief. Who knows who told me that and who told them that? In their training. And so then it just these are these belief systems that keep permeating, and we then go repeat them without stepping back and saying, do I actually agree with that? Is that true? And one of the things that I think is really important, which is the concept of a connected leader, is that we're nurturing people one by one, that it's not a one-to-many approach. And so even when we're trying to put these types of things into the organization, we may think as a leader, this is what needs to happen. But we actually need to meet with people individually to hear how they're working, what their concerns are, what other ideas we need to bring into whatever change we're trying to build into an organization, or how to even help them. And so a lot of times we don't even ask that simple question, how can I help? And really as a leader, and this is, I see, way too much in the accounting profession, is accountants love the work. Like, they love the client work. So taking time for the people side is not why they became an accountant for many.
Right. Yep.
And so as you rise through the ranks, that percentage should be flipping of the amount of client work versus helping people to get to their best self and their best level. It's not about you doing the work. And so there's so many things that trickle out of that. One thing that's really important is delegation. And if you're not good at delegating, learning how to delegate should be a goal on your list if you are a leader. And we really become leaders very early on in our careers, especially in public accounting, because we start giving review notes to staff as a senior. you know,
Right.
and so we've got to learn how to give feedback, and we've got to learn how to train people so that they can get to the next level, not just be like, oh, they got it wrong, I'll just take care of it, I don't have time to talk to them about this. Or that we brand people because the one time we gave them a chance, they screwed up, and then 3 years later someone's like, you know, ready to be up for the next level, and in the room they're like, oh, well, 3 years ago they were on a client for me and really screwed it up. Well, we can never get past changing the environment if we can't really truly be there for people. You know, this is part of the pipeline issue, I believe, is that a lot of these firms where people are overworked, if you really look at the billable hours and, you know, the capacity, there's plenty of people.
Right.
But there's a disproportionate amount of hours for the people that excel versus the people that are seen as not as good.
Yep.
But no one actually takes the time to try to develop that person or take them out. Like if they can't produce at that level, but because it's easier when there's someone that's like, I'll take it, I'm good at it, or I know I can just give them the work and they go after it, that person gets overwhelmed, burnt out, and quits too.
Yeah.
So
very well said.
This leadership piece is such an important thing that we learn, you know, if it doesn't come naturally to us, that we make as a goal for us if we're really going to change around how our cultures are.
And it sounds to me like like purpose kind of fits into that. I mean, a well-defined purpose. You're going to get better leaders if you have a better defined purpose and somebody who can kind of articulate and sort of live that purpose.
Yeah, and I would say along those lines, not everybody is a good people person.
Yeah.
So we can identify the leaders that are subject matter experts that should never have staff assigned to them.
Yeah.
But we actually need them in the firm, and they can still have a career path. And the ones that should have more people reporting to them, that is a purposeful thing for them. They enjoy seeing people thrive and helping people thrive, and then shift responsibility based on that amongst your leadership group.
I think that's very well said. What a challenge for organizations here. I mean, for folks that are listening to this, I mean, it seems overwhelming, but I think the key here, it sounds like, is just to kind of start. I mean, to just
exactly.
And so I think that part can't be sort of stated enough. I mean, it is a big thing to change organizational culture, and I know a lot of folks that I talk to, I know that they really struggle with it, but it is possible, and it is something that I think that we could certainly do a better job on, especially within the accounting profession. So
yes.
So Amy, if folks would like to get a hold of you, or if they would, you've mentioned some of the works that you've written, some of the books that you've written. How would they be able to do that? What's the best way for them to connect with you, and also to get a hold of some of the books that you have published?
Yeah, so you can go, I have a website called amyvetter.com. It's VETTER. And there is a books page. There's a blog page. You can sign up for a weekly newsletter where we send content about all of the concepts we've talked about today. My social media is Amy Vetter CPA, no matter what social media channel you're on, and you can find me there.
Guys, and just as a word of advice, Amy has a great website and puts out a lot of great content. So be sure to check her out, amyvetter.com. So, Amy, thank you so much for being on Accountable this week. This has been great. I've really enjoyed just hearing about all of the things about how we can sort of achieve some balance and be better leaders and just build better organizations. I think this is fantastic. So thank you so much for being on Accountable.
Thank you.
So, folks, thanks so much, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Accountable.
Thanks for listening to Accountable. Be sure to subscribe for more interviews and insights from today's business leaders.